Mhm. And okay, you're good. Okay. Welcome to another virtual author event at the Poison Pen Bookstore. I'm John Charles, and tonight the Poison Pen is delighted to have back with us virtually one of my favorite authors, Jayne Ann Krentz, who's here as her alter literary ego, Jayne Castle, with her new book, People in Glass Houses. As a special treat, or some might say a trick, we're joined by author Christina Dodd, who has some exciting news to share with us later in the event. So why don't we start by, I'd like to welcome Christina and Jayne.
Thank you, John.
Thank
Good
you.
to be here.
Glad, always fun to be here.
We're
We're
always
never a
delighted.
dull moment with the three of us, that's for sure.
Oh,
Yes, I think there's an analogy to Stooges somewhere, but we won't go that far. Jayne, I know that there's a lot of readers that know a lot about you, but on the chance that there's some new readers who may not know about you, why don't we start by having you tell us a little bit about yourself prior to becoming a published author? Who was Jayne?
Who was Jayne? Jayne was a librarian, and at heart, Jayne is still a librarian, as you are.
Mhm.
Those of us who are librarians are librarians for life, I think. It's a mindset.
it's like the Marines.
And we've
Or
made
Alcoholics
Christina,
Anonymous.
we've made Christina an honorary librarian because
Mhm.
in her work, she does that kind of research. So,
Yeah. Well,
yep.
she worked in a bookstore, so she is
I did.
Yes,
tangentially.
yes, tangentially. Um, yeah, that was actually my day job while I was trying to get published. And I come from an era when self-publishing was not an option. So I had my day job for a long time before finally got published, because in those days it was New York. It was the only way, the only option, trad publishing, they call it now, traditional publishing.
Mhm.
Um, and then it took a while. I told myself I would quit my librarian job as soon as I was making enough money writing that I could afford to leave the job. It had to be as much money as I was making as a librarian. You know anything about librarians' pay?
Which is a pretty low bar, but
It was a very low bar, yeah. So I think it was one of those deals where you just one day you wake up and said, I'm going to do this full time and I can afford to do it. I'm making just enough, scraping by here. And I just want to do it. I just had to do it. So here I am.
yeah, I
And
think I discovered a quote somewhere you'd give an interview, which I thought was interesting and kind of summed up your journey towards publication. You had written, sadly, I was not one of those little kids who knew she wanted to write from the time she was 5. I have, however, always been a reader, and I stumbled into writing when it occurred to me that I could tell stories my way.
Yeah, I think that drives a lot of us, don't you, Christina? That at some point, it's not that you don't love what you're reading or enjoy certain authors and you glom onto them, like we're fans like everybody else is,
Mhm.
of certain of our favorites. But I think at some point for an author, you just want to tell the story your way. You want the dialogue to go your way. You want the ending to go your way. And if you're never bitten by that bug, you're fine.
Mhm.
Be grateful. But if it hits you, it's hard to resist rewriting the core story and finding your own core story.
And your early books were with Harlequin and Silhouette, is that correct?
Yeah, well, the earliest, the
Or was
brand
Dill?
for the brand that really launched the whole business was a little line called Dell Ecstasy.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, Vivian
yeah,
Stevens was the editor, and she just kind of changed the world in New York when she started publishing. And I think she probably, I don't, it's been a while since I've talked to her, but I think she once came at it as an editor who loved the genre. She liked the books herself, and that was why she was able to pick the winners, and she picked a lot of the winners.
Yeah, she did, including you. Um, Early on, though, you kind of flirted with paranormal romance, futuristic romance, but it kind of didn't go as expected. Is that correct?
Well, I have probably committed career murder more often than any living author. I
excuse me.
been there, done that. I Christina, I've had this conversation before. We both agree. This is a business where you are constantly reinventing yourself.
Mhm.
And several years ago, when I first started the paranormal, it was there. The market just wasn't there.
Tell your line, Jayne. I love this line.
My line: people stood around the block not to buy the book.
But as you said, you reinvent yourself. And I also think in publishing and writing, things come in cycles or waves or however you want to phrase it. Maybe readers weren't ready for your futuristics then, but they certainly are now because your new book is futuristic romance, People in Glass Houses. What
Yes.
can you tell us about it?
Well, People in Glass Houses is one of my long-running series set on the planet Harmony. This is a series that nobody reads for my clever plots, nobody reads for my brilliant dialogue, nobody reads.
Wait. I think some people do read it for the dialogue.
What they read it for is the dang dust bunnies. And and I knew Christine was going to bring a dust bunny. That's it.
No,
And
no. Wait, stop.
Oh, good heavens.
she's got a whole collection of dust bunnies. Oh my God. It's
This is my husband. I mean, he's like dragging out his fuzzy stuff going, hey, look, it's an abominable dust bunny.
the dust bunnies were never conceived to take over the books, but that's what happened. They were meant to be, and they still are in this sense, an animal companion for the main character in the stories. But they've got a bit of a psychic vibe, and they are very loyal, but also very mischievous, and just, like that perfect animal companion you always wanted when you were when you were growing up, and that we all still glom onto today. So anyhow, the dust bunny's name in this one, for those who follow me, is Newton the dust bunny. So
And you certainly bring it up to date by making him an influencer in the book.
yes. I think when I die, I think my headstone is going to read, she wrote the dust bunny books, and that's probably going to be as much of a literary
If somebody put that on your grave, you would rise up.
I also wrote some other stuff.
You'd be reanimated.
Yeah. Oh, but
So
I think I also like the storyline. I really like the futuristics because it gives me a chance to go into the psychic thing in a big way, which I really enjoy playing with. I always make sure people who read outside the box, so to speak, and read the paranormal, understand that I'm not doing vampires and werewolves and shapeshifters. That's a kind of a different category of paranormal. And I can love those books and thoroughly enjoy them, but I don't write them. They don't really suit my core story, I don't think, for me. But I love the psychic vibe. I love the psychic thing. And when you put it on another planet, you get to kind of run wild with it. Or I do. That's what I'm doing with it. So
tell us a little bit about the protagonists, Joshua and Molly.
Well, Joshua Knight is now known as the Tarnished Knight because he screwed up and lost a whole expedition team in the underworld, where he is a navigator down below. And the underworld, for those who don't know, are the maze of tunnels and ruins left behind by the culture, the people that once colonized this planet, couldn't handle the atmosphere on the planet, eventually abandoned the planet, but they left behind all their ruins and their tunnels and things like that. And so now they're hugely they're being explored by the human colonists because there's lots of untold mysteries down there and treasures and fascinating things that archaeologists are a big thing. So and he leads archaeology teams into the tunnels, but he lost a team, and on that team was the heroine's sister, and she'll do anything to get her to find her sister. And he's happy to help. He's been looking too, but he's lost his memory. So those two have to team up, and that's the core of the mystery. There is a mystery. There is a plot to this thing. There's not just a dust bunny. I want to emphasize that.
No, there's a very twisty plot. There's some nice turns to it. Where did Harmony come from originally? Because this is part of your universe, but it's not the first book in the series.
No, no, no. Well, early on when I set out to do the series, I needed a way to explain why the colonists had landed on Harmony and why there was no contact with Earth. I needed a separate world. I didn't want the high-tech contact of Earth. I wanted to create a society that was roughly equivalent to where we are today. So I came up with the physics. My physics for this whole explanation involves an energy curtain that opened around Earth 200 years ago. And during that time, the energy curtain made it possible to commute basically into interstellar commute. And then the curtain closed. And the colonists, wherever they happened to be colonizing, were stuck there. There's no way home. And it threw them back into what happened was when they could no longer get their tech from Earth, everything started to deteriorate in a hurry because of this foreign environment. And so they were thrown back to roughly the equivalent of the 1800s. And now it's moved forward to where we are. And that's kind of the history of our people on Harmony. And I wanted readers to feel at home. That I wasn't trying to wow them with a strange new world that didn't have any sense of familiarity to it. I wanted it to feel familiar. Because I think humans are always humans. And I don't care what environment you put us down in, we're going to screw up just as much as we always do. And we're also going to have the same emotional responses, which is that's what writing fiction is all about, right? Writing human emotions and the problems they get us into.
Do you, is there any truth to the idea that possibly Anne McCaffrey might have inspired you when you were thinking about Harmony?
Yeah. And before, those of the people who know Anne McCaffrey's writing associate her with she invented the dragons thing. Let's face it, she invented the whole dragons thing, and people writing dragons. But before that, she actually wrote, I think it was her very first novel, was a book called Restoree, which was a futurist. Woman gets kidnapped by aliens, dumped on a planet, and she's this one human and on this planet and has to deal with what where she's landed. And I just fell in love with that book. I remember reading, I was 19 years old. I just remember reading it and I thought, where's more? I want more like this. I want more like this. And of course there wasn't any. And she never did any more. So I think it didn't do her career any good either at that point. But then she moved on. She reinvented herself with the dragon books. So
for those of your readers that know and love you, you write under different pseudonyms, different names. You have Jayne Castle, Jayne Ann Krentz, and Amanda Quick. And
yes.
Some people might say that you're writing different subgenres or genres, but you actually look at it differently. You don't think of them as different genres, just three different worlds.
Yeah.
Can you explain that?
I write romantic suspense, and whatever world you pick me up in, you're going to get a murder mystery and a romance. That's what I write. I love that combination of the emotional side and the danger side. And I think that the romance raises the stakes in the mystery, and the mystery raises the stakes in the romance. And I can see Christina nodding because she agrees with me. She also writes that kind of suspense, and it's its own thing, isn't it, Christina?
No, and it's recognizable. It doesn't matter what the setting is. You know it when you see it.
You know it when you see it. And that's my core story. I like moving it in different periods of time because I get to tell different, it gives me a lot to do with the plots. It enables me to change the plots up a lot. Stories that fit in the 19th century don't work so well in the 21st century and vice versa. So there's it puts your mind into a different lane when you start plotting. So it's refreshing for me to go back and forth between my three worlds. But basically, I think if you like my characters in one world, you're gonna like them in the other. Those are my characters. That's what I do.
I think it comes down to your voice, which is the same no matter what you're writing. You could be writing military thrillers and it would still come out in Jayne Ann Krentz's voice, for that matter. authors sometimes are not their own best critic, but if you had to look at your work, what would you say this is what I really excel at? And I have some ideas, so I'll let you go
You're good,
first.
you're going to be the critic. Okay. I think I know what I love writing the most is the dialogue. Once I'm into the dialogue, I'm flying. The hardest thing for me to write, and the thing I don't do all that well, is narrative, description.
Mhm.
I just want to get through it. I have to really settle down and force myself to think I need description. I can't write a book without something to describe it. But I hear the books in my head. I hear the characters long before I see the landscape. So that's the hard part for me, and that's what I keep to a minimum. Very short description paragraphs. And I always say, if you're reading one of my books and you do hit a paragraph of description, I wish you would slow down and read it, because it probably took me half a day to write it.
Well, actually, I think you're very perceptive about your own strengths because your books are dialogue driven. They're very much character driven, dialogue driven. If you're looking for a Kathleen Woodiwiss kind of romance with those lush descriptive pages, that's not you. That's a different kind of writer. But in some ways, your books also remind me of kind of the classic crime films of the 30s and 40s, like Bogart and Bacall and some of those characters, because they've got that dynamic. You set your heroine and hero up, and then you kind of watch them either kiss each other or kill each other. You don't never really know until the end.
I think it's that 30s voice, whatever it was that from the 30s movies, which we all know when we see it or hear it. It's just part of our culture. Even if you don't ever watch the movies, you kind of know it when you hear it. And I think that suits those movies were so heavily dialogue driven. That's what drove those films. And characters are always talking to each other, and they're talking fast, and they're really moving through it. And it's like, you got to pay attention to listen to really enjoy a 30s film. And it's all about the dialogue.
What about you, Christina? What would you say are your strengths as an
Oh, I
author?
agree with you about her. The thing that Jayne and I have in common, we have a lot in common with our writing, because I read her during the whole time I was trying to get published. But we both have that sense of humor, and it comes through. People always comment on the humor.
And I think that attracts a certain audience, and it doesn't attract another audience. Humor is a dicey thing for an author to possess. It's fun to work with, but humor is very individual, and people come at it from a whole different range. And I've had people say, "Oh, she's so funny," and somebody else will come along and say, "What?" I didn't laugh once.
It's when I make a joke and people say, correct me. They don't realize I'm joking, and so then they try and correct me, and I'm like, I don't.
That was supposed to be a joke. Never mind.
You just can't go anywhere with that. So
You're right. It depends on the reader, and there are readers who love humor. There are readers who love the new kind of brand of angsty romance there's almost devoid of humor, but it's so emotionally intense, and that's something different for some readers.
Yeah, and you can ruin you can ruin a good gothic. I mean, it's anything that requires that really dark kind of atmospheric voice. If you start putting too much humor in, you can use a little sarcasm or a little, what's the word I want? Snide, that kind
Snark, yeah.
a bit of snark will work sometimes, but outright humor will just kill off a gothic. You lose that atmosphere. At least the traditional kind of Daphne du Maurier style gothic.
Yeah, they have to take themselves seriously, and
yes, I
you
guess
can't interject humor.
If you want the reader to take you seriously, yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting problem.
But Jayne and I both do read the angsty ones, and we both enjoy them. It's not, I don't think we're one reader or another. We are all the readers. That works.
Yeah, I think the voice just has to pull you into that world. And if you're there for the story, you're there for the story. And the easiest way I think to see it is if you look at audiobooks. And people who listen to audiobooks will tell you, "Oh, John, there's all those audiobooks from the library."
Mhm.
How many times did readers come in and they would start picking their books based on the narrator, not the author?
Yeah. Mhm.
Because the narrator's voice made or broke the story.
It's something I never understood because I don't get audiobooks, but that's just me. I
They
can't
do.
listen to them, but lots of people do. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, in fact, Christine and I, who happen to share the same hairstylist, Alex, if you're out there, hi. This is a plug for Alex. She was saying she's an audio fan, and she was saying she knows it's a bad audio narrator when she's doing something else and listening to the story, because that's the whole point, that you can multitask, and she suddenly loses track of the story. Then she blames that entirely on the narrator.
Mm.
And it's just that's what a voice is. And within the written word, everybody has a voice. Like Christina's voice in this book is a lot different from my voice, and yet we appeal to the same readers. There's just, I don't know, it's whoever likes me usually likes her, and vice versa.
Yeah, I think it's the humor, it's the quips, it's the banter, it's the kind of characters that you don't necessarily find in every run-of-the-mill books. You kind of create your own unique characters in many ways.
Yeah, I don't know how that happens. I'm like, Christina, I mean, really, how did you give voice to the daughter of Romeo and Juliet? How did that happen?
She was just there. She was, my daughter said, the daughter of Romeo and Juliet, and I just wrote her. I knew who she was right away.
And first person, you went into first person too.
I was taking runs at that for probably the last 10 years, but this one, because I didn't think I would sell it, was definitely first person right from the get-go. And I wrote the first 4 pages, and then I put it away because I thought nobody's ever going to buy this. I'm wasting my time. But it was
and then you got the brilliant idea.
Well, I'm telling you and Susan Phillips, yeah.
You said us the first 4 pages. That was your big mistake.
Oh, it wasn't a mistake. So no, they said, Christina, you have to write this. And so I said, okay. And then I sent it to my agent, who said, well, when I picked myself up off the floor, it seemed like a good idea, and told me to finish the book. So
yeah. What we're talking about.
Yes. For those not familiar with what Jayne's holding up, why don't you tell us about your big summertime surprise, Christina?
A Daughter of Fair Verona is the story, obviously, of the daughter of Romeo and Juliet. And the main reaction that people have when I say that is of course, Romeo and Juliet are dead. Well, they're fictional, and in fact, they never lived. And so if somebody wants to pick up Shakespeare's fiction and flop it around, they really, really can. And it is a historical fiction, first person. And she ends up being a sleuth unwillingly. She's a really snarky, smart-ass girl who's almost 20 and been a spinster for 6 years, and just wants to stay with her family. And things don't work out for her in that manner at all.
So it's the first book in a series.
It is the first. Yes, the second book is already finished, and this one is out June 25th this year, and then the next one will be out the next year, and then there's going to be a third one, which I have the green light to start writing.
Yeah, wow. It's just delightful. I just thoroughly enjoyed it, and it's a great murder mystery too. Perfect.
Much fun.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a mystery element to it. There's a romance threaded into it that I'm sure you're going to develop a bit as the series goes along, and there's a lot of history. And how did you research Renaissance Italy?
Well, the first thing I did, of course, was look up, when did Romeo and Juliet take place? And the general answer is 13th to 15th century. That's 200 years, which just let me do whatever I wanted, because if there's no consensus as to when it takes place, I just played with it. And it's really late medieval, early Renaissance, and I ran with that. The main thing I really stuck with was research-wise was the food. And because I love food, as Jayne is sitting there smoking.
I was going to say there's a personal reason.
Yeah, but this is pre-New World, so there's no tomatoes, there's no potatoes, there's no corn, there's no like kidney beans or anything like that. I really did stick with the what they had at the time and try and recreate the tables there, and did an incredible amount of reading and research and cookbooks, and justified a lot of my book buying by doing the research. But to me, it's fascinating and it's fun.
Is this your first? I mean, you've written suspense, you've written romantic suspense, you've written books where there's kind of some mystery at the core of the story, but this is really a traditional mystery because you have to plant clues, you have to have suspects, you have to kind of shift suspicion and throw in red herrings. Am I reading this correctly, that this is really your kind of your first step into traditional mystery?
I don't think I'd call it my first step into traditional mystery, because I definitely have done in mysteries in the suspenses, but this is more, I hesitate to use this term, a cozy mystery, in that
Okay.
it's set in a
Well,
small
yeah.
world, and a contained world with the small cast, and because it's Romeo and Juliet and their household and their children, you basically know the setup of the entire story. So I was able to use that. So the reader immediately walks into a familiar world. Her parents are always like monologuing and having passionate outbursts and spouting poetry, and she's just like the way modern women would be in these highly romantic times. So it's just
I think of these as a historical mystery. Like I think there's a whole thing of, there's a genre of them that I think of, and I call them lady sleuths.
Oh, yeah.
They're more like Deanna Rayburn is writing
Mhm.
a lady sleuth, to my mind. Was it
Sherry Thomas.
Sherry Thomas
Yeah.
has, what did she do? She's doing
Lady Sherlock.
Lady Sherlock. Again, took a fictional character and flipped it on its head, made it a woman.
Mhm.
And I think people just love those. I do. They're just
there's the revisitation too to the classic novel, which Vanessa Kelly has Murder in Highbury coming out, and I
Yeah.
just read it, and it's Emma. What happened after Jane Austen's Emma? And so here we have Emma, and she discovers a body on the first page, and it goes from there. And it's Jane Austen land, and so much fun to read. That was great.
Have you done any outreach to Shakespearean societies, Christina? And
uh,
have you been rebuffed?
you've got one on your side. You have one on your side.
I do. Eloisa James, who's Mary Blythe, who's Eloisa James, is a Shakespearean scholar and a friend, and so she read it and quoted it, and she apparently really loved it. So I'm very happy about that. She talks. If you hear her talk about it, she basically says Shakespeare stole the plot. He stole all his plots. Of course he did. There's only so many plots, and he wouldn't care. What he was looking for, of course, was a popular story that resounded with his audience. So, and that's me.
Let's go broader a bit with both of you. You've been writing for quite a while now. What have you learned about the publishing business that surprised you the most?
Oh my God.
And
It's a business.
Yeah.
It's got the word literary attached to it, but at its heart, publishing is a business. And I think authors have to be prepared to look at it from that point of view. As much as they may love the writing part, that's a core element, obviously, but there's a huge business world around it that demands attention.
you have to be smart. You have to survive, and you have to protect your ego for sure, but you also have to protect that core of storytelling and creativity, because nobody else is going to watch over it
Yeah.
up to us.
Yeah. There's a kind of a mythology, I don't know what, about editors of old nurturing an author, or agents nurturing an author. And I'm here to tell you, they dump you faster than they can. No, as long as you're selling, they're nurturing. But if the books hit a wall, you have to be prepared to reinvent yourself in this business, sometimes multiple times. And the market keeps changing too. I mean, who could have seen the paranormal a few years ago? And then all of a sudden it was everywhere. Remember when, was it Thomas Harris invented this pretty much from scratch, the serial killer?
Mhm.
I mean, the really gory, horrible serial
Yeah.
killer story. And then there was like years of it's still a subgenre.
Yes. And then there was Gone Girl and the psychologically, I can't think of unreliable narrator,
Yeah, the
psychological
unreliable
suspense.
narrator. Yeah. Yeah. And now we're seeing a lot of gothic, or we have been seeing a lot of gothic actually coming along for a while.
It's kind of the rise of horror. It's really interesting because on the one hand, horror's creeping into mystery, suspense, romance in the form of gothic and paranormal. And now this, like in the last 2 years, this should please you, Christina, because we are going to dub you a cozy writer. Cozy is not just for mysteries anymore. It's for romance, it's for fantasy. I think,
Fascinating.
yeah, it's like the opposite ends of the literary spectrum. On the one hand, they want to scare you to death. On the other hand, they want to like embrace you in a warm hug and give you a cup of tea or something. So,
The horror thing really enthralls me. And yet I distinguish between kind of what we think of as classic horror. I don't even know how to explain classic horror, but you know it when you see it. But this horror light, which is a something else that's really coming out of the Gothic tradition. And I think that's why I glommed onto it as a reader, because it's the Gothic element, but with a real supernatural element, and not just in the past, a lot of writers who are doing Gothic would give you the logical explanation for the ghost that appeared in the hallway, you know, that kind of thing.
mhm,
These days, writers are going for it. It's a ghost.
mhm,
Simone St. James, for example, classic
yeah,
example, real ghosts, and she makes you believe them.
Oh yeah, she's scary.
mhm.
But in a Gothic-y way that I love. It works for me. Yeah. I think it's maybe because traditional horror invokes an element of true evil,
Mm.
and Gothic light is more what I think of as it's righting some wrong from the past. It's setting something straight. That's how you free the ghost, or that's how you get rid of the spirit in the house, the bad, you know, your main character has to solve the mystery of the past in order to put the present at ease or at
Right.
peace, I think.
I
So
think
it's more of a healing story, a healing or a redemption story, I think.
well, I think horror is actually kind of getting its turn in the spotlight because every other genre before it became popular was viewed by those who didn't read it as monolithic. All mysteries were alike, all fantasy novels were alike, all romances were alike, all horror books were alike. And now they're kind of saying, no, every genre has all these different subgenres and offshoots and different levels and flavors and things like that, which is why sometimes I think readers may say, oh, I don't like romance. I don't like historical mysteries. You just haven't found the one that you do.
Yes. Yes. And that's where an independent bookstore with a
Yes.
wide and knowing staff works, such as the Poison Pen. That's where you get the guidance, that and libraries. Those are the
Mhm.
good places you can go for curated collections, I guess you would say, and guidance. And I don't know how many times I've lost track, John, that you've turned me on to a book by an author I never heard of, but you knew I'd like it, and I fell in love with it.
We share similar reading tastes, so that makes it easy in a sense. But yeah, and I've always appreciated you and Christina's book recommendations because it's always interesting to get somebody else's take on a book. And even if you may not necessarily agree with someone in the end, it does open the door to possibilities. And that's what readers want is more, well, it's not like we need more books, but yes, we do. We want more possibilities.
I wish I could stop buying books, but that's just not on my horizon.
Yeah.
Yeah, that the storytelling thing is just everybody loves a good story. We're just hardwired to get into a good story.
And that's why people follow certain authors like Jayne, and it's because she tells a good story. They're always good. I always know what I'm getting. It's a brand name, and I'm excited to get a book. I got this today, and I started it, and I was like, I don't know, when did I stop? I'm like page 50 and I was supposed to be working for Pete's sakes. It was just, but
Oh, thanks. Thank you.
yeah, it's fabulous. So Jayne, I have a question here. When
Yes.
you're describing the two little girls on the swing, you say, Leona, it's Molly and Leona, and you say, make it go really high, Leona ordered. She was inclined to tell others what to do and how to do it, whether or not they wanted the instructions. Is this anybody based on anybody in your life, Jayne?
Is that character based on anybody I know? Why no, Christina? I don't know anybody.
Maybe a couple of somebodies.
Actually, any one of my friends, pick a friend. If there's an opinionated group of people out there, it's authors. Ask an author and you will get an opinion. And what's the saying? Never hesitates to give you the benefit of her opinion. Yeah, that's my friend Christina.
And Susan Elizabeth Phillips, Kristen Hanna.
I've heard John voice a few opinions too.
Oh, yes, he has.
I try to phrase them in the form of a question or something, so people are confused. But before we turn, you've got many fans out there that have questions, but before we bring those questions in, can you, if you want to, can you tell us what's coming next for you? And Christina, reiterate your June book and the importance of pre-orders.
Well, for me, the next one up will actually not be until January. And the book is called Shattering Dawn. It's under my Jayne Ann Krentz name because it's the last book in a trilogy called The Lost Night Files.
That's right.
Which is set in our contemporary world. It's not a futuristic. And The Lost Night Files follows three women who had a night of amnesia. And when they woke up, they had psychic abilities and they're out to find the dude who experimented on them.
And once again, you show your brilliance in staying in touch with popular culture by dragging in podcasts into the story.
The podcast thing is just everywhere. Oh my gosh. It's like become, I don't know, it's the new radio, I suppose. Don't you think, in a way? Yeah.
You want to explain what radio is to the people that don't?
Oh, you remember that radio on the radio? Oh gosh, you can't even buy a car with a radio, can you anymore? I don't even know if they're in.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You can't find a station, but you can buy a car with a radio.
You can. Okay, good to know. Good to know.
All right, Christina, tell us about what's coming from you.
Okay, The Daughter of Fair Verona is up next, and that comes on June 25th. And yes, I'm doing an autographing at the Poison Pen in person on the 30th of June. And when you pre-order basically you have to pre-order. That's how they decide how many books to print. And when you do a pre-order from the Poison Pen, I'm going to be autographing the books, obviously, there. And then once you do a pre-order and you have the proof that you've pre-ordered, my publisher did these fabulous stickers, which are just so cute. And all you do is go to the publisher's website, which is Kensington, Jayne Gowan, Kensington Books, and fill out the form, and you can find that form on my website, ChristinaDodd.com, or the other website now, which is daughtermontague.com, and just click through and fill it in, and you get the sticker sheet when the book comes out.
Let me just add that I know sometimes readers don't recognize this, but even if you don't purchase from your local bookstore, you can help your favorite author by going to your local public library and suggesting they order the author's upcoming book, because library sales help too.
Yes, absolutely.
Libraries buy a lot of books.
They really, really do. And, one of the things because I had Jayne's book up on my Facebook page and people were saying, yes, I'm number 14 on the list of 60 people at my bookstore that won her book. And I was like, wow, 60 people signed up ahead of time to get that book.
That's a library. Yeah. Get on the waiting list. They usually, John, in my memory is that they usually had a formula, right? Every so many people on the list, that would be another copy that they would order. So
yeah, back in the dark ages when I worked in the library, it was for every 5 requests, we had to purchase another copy of a book.
So you're not waiting that long. You're not waiting for all 60 to go through. You're just to get on the list. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it depends on your library system and your budget. There's a lot of factors, but yeah, I mean, that's another important way to help support your favorite authors because publishing it's a business, as Jayne said, and numbers matter.
Yeah. Numbers matter. If you want to see more, if you want to see more books.
Yeah, you have
Okay.
to support the talent.
We do have some questions from your readers out there. The first one is from someone who said you talked about audiobooks. Can you talk about them in context of your own writing? How much control do you have if your publisher does audiobooks? What kind of input do you have? And it's for both of you.
Yeah, I can just tell you from my own experience is I don't listen to audio very much, so I don't have a good ear for voices. On a pragmatic level, what happens is that the audio publisher, they buy the rights, just like the book publisher has bought the rights. The audio publisher then is in charge of finding the narrator. And very often, Christina and I will get like 3 little clips, from 3 different voice actors
To listen to. Yep.
to listen to. They're always all good because they're professionals. So I ask someone I know who loves audiobooks and I get her opinion. Which of these 3 clips would you listen to for 8 hours? Because you're going to have to listen to that voice for hours. That's what makes it important to choose the right narrator. But that's about it in terms of what we have input on.
Yeah, exactly the same story for me. I'm not an auditorial learner, and I don't listen to books, but I read them in paper usually. And when I get those clips, I turn them over to my assistant who listens. That's all she does is listen to audiobooks, and she tells me which one to choose.
Yeah. I will say that, the audio business has been booming in the past few years. It's just really taken off. And I'm sure there's a lot of good and bad material, not material, but, narrators out there just because it's been a booming business. But my publisher has, my audio publisher works out of New York, and they have access to a lot of the aspiring stage actors who are voice trained. They have the trained voices. Because when you think about it, think about sitting down and reading for 8 hours straight. I mean, that takes talent.
Another one of your readers wondered about if you think a good cover can sell a book, and conversely, can a bad cover and I guess a title halt or impede book sales?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yes.
I don't want to tell you how many books I've bought based on the cover. I know better. Here's why I think the cover is so important, and title too, because in a way it's a little snapshot of the story. It's like a little burst of a little snapshot, and that sets the tone for the book.
Yeah,
that's it. Yeah, no, when I look at my own sales with some of the bad covers, and it's like, and if a publisher's determined, you're stuck with the cover, and
yeah,
it's not always easy. I've had a 3-armed cover. We all know this one.
That's the cover, the legendary 3-armed cover by Christina Dodd. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right because of the last almost decade, there's been this rom-com craze, and they kind of shifted into the cartoony covers, which work really well for some books. But I think sometimes publishers try to borrow the success of something when it doesn't necessarily match the content. And that can really be jarring for a reader if they see this cheery pastel, clinch cartoon couple on the cover, and it turns out to be a very dark and intensely emotional love story.
Yes. I think it's interesting too to see the new trend toward more decorative books.
Yeah.
Not just the cover, but what do you call it?
Oh, yes, it's the
Embellish.
special editions that seem to be a craze with the deckled edges and the end papers, and little secret, it also lets publishers charge more for the books, so that's a plus too.
This one's gonna have deckled edges.
Ooh, really?
Yeah,
Cool.
at least that's the last I heard.
See, I'd pay
You
good money to get a
I'm just the
deckled edge.
author. I don't know.
I'm excited. Deckled edges. There, it does give it a. It's a tactile thing, I think.
Yeah.
Just yeah.
Well, there's kind of the return to the book as not, I read an article recently and it kind of surprised me, and though I don't know why, but for some readers, the book is also a decorative object. It's almost like a purse or something like that that you carry around and as an accessory. And I thought, okay,
I guess to some extent that would be true. I haven't. If you carry a book out to the swimming pool at a resort, I suppose you're going to be conscious of it. I think it's just the holding of it, the physical holding of the book. And when I sit down to read, I do like books as opposed to I find it stressful actually to read on a ebook and an e-reader.
Yeah.
Christine and I have discussed this before, and we think it's because we spend our lives on a computer screen. So when we read, we want a whole different physical experience, and so we're still fans of the classic book, but I just like to look at that cover before I open it again, and I
Yeah.
different experience.
Another one of your readers wondered when you're not writing, and they also added, why are you not writing more? What do you do in your spare time? Do you have hobbies? Do you have favorite television shows? What occupies the rest of your non-writing life?
I eat. So does Christina. Sometimes we eat together.
So we have very different diets, but as in Jayne's very disciplined and I'm really not. And so it's always interesting. I'm the one that's looking for restaurants where I think she can actually eat too with her diet. I garden.
That's
right
right.
now in the middle of spring, and so I'm trying to finish a book really fast, and so I can dash outside and plant peas or whatever.
Yeah. I don't think of myself as being a hobbyist, except I do like cooking in the evenings. I find it very therapeutic. I don't know why. It's not that I'm a great cook. I'm not particularly, but I just like the physicality of another type of creativity or something. And it's instant gratification because you get to eat it right away. That and a couple of glasses of wine is my my excitement for
That's a wild life.
Well, see, I was going to ask you that, Jayne, because it could be just me, but I got the impression you are quite knowledgeable about wine.
Christina. Everything I know about wine, I learned from Christina. She's the expert. Ask Christina.
My husband is he really, really knows his wines. So yeah, we have a wine cellar.
Yeah, an actual wine cellar. I've got like a little wine cooler. Kind of a half-ass wine cellar.
But Scott was really concerned about 6 months ago because he said, "My God, we're down to 600 bottles. What are we going to do?" It was like,
Wow.
honey, you got to get a grip.
He falls into the category of collector.
He's a collector.
He's a collector, yes. Well, I had the problem of books because I'm a voracious reader and I don't reread. So I finally found a library that a private library at a retirement community, and I just keep shuffling the books I read off to them because what do you do with the walls and walls of books?
Now, see, I find that interesting, Jayne. You really have never reread anything? You're not a rereader?
I reread Anne McCaffrey's Restorees several times.
Okay.
Beyond that, no.
All the time. All the time. All I have is books. I have shelves of Jayne Ann Krentz and Jayne Castle and Amanda Quick and Jane Taylor and all of her other names. I reread all the time. I love rereading. It's comfort. Wait, I'm going to leap up and get some that will be interesting.
I just don't reread, and I think it's because I'm always on to something. I want the next new thing. I'm just kind of looking for.
Yeah, there's definitely pros and cons to rereading. It cuts down on what you can read that's new, but I can understand Christina's position. Another viewer wanted to know whether you think the current rise in social media has been a boon to authors or a bane to their existence.
I don't know, because it took the place of whatever we had before. So there's no alternative.
Well, I mean, it's not quite the same thing, but like decades ago, authors used to have real newsletters that they would send out and other ways that they kept in touch with readers, but now it's all digital and web-based and things like that. So I guess, is it an either or both?
Well, we
It's
still have newsletters, but they're digital.
Mm.
Yeah, which please sign up for our newsletters. Jayne and I both have newsletters, and we're very entertaining.
Yes, funny you should mention that, John. Our newsletters you can sign up at our website, websites. Yeah.
I think for us, as authors, our biggest problem is that it eats so much time.
Yeah.
There's Facebook and there's Instagram and there's TikTok, and how do I learn how to make a video? And it just eats so much time. And I imagine I could do an extra book a year if I didn't have that, and who would know about it when they were published? So it's part of the business, is what you do. It's the business part that Jayne was talking about.
Yeah, it's part of the business. And it always was, I suppose, but on a much smaller scale in the old days. Well, I think also there were more avenues for the publisher to advertise your book when it came out, because there were 2 or 3 newspapers in every city.
It's true,
And
yeah.
you could buy an ad in the newspaper. There were bookstores of various sizes. I keep going back to the days, because I'm that old, when you could walk into any mall in America and find a B. Dalton's at one end and a Walden Books at the other end. Well, they're gone. That's just gone. And
There's
nothing
not malls anymore, Jayne. There's no malls anymore.
whole dang malls. Yeah. That the shopping habits changed.
Yeah, and it's fascinating because I know someone who was involved in like the late 80s, early 90s with bookstores like B. Dalton, Walden's, and they had those little monthly printed newsletters that I think they were called like Love Notes or something like that, that
Yeah.
you would go into the bookstore and you'd grab that and that would tell you what was coming out that month.
Well, plus when you walked by, there was a display out front which had all the new releases every week.
Mhm.
It was just right there in your face that you walked from Nordstrom down to J.C. Penney and you're going to pass this lovely display of, and then you said, oh, I didn't know Stephen King had a new book out, or I didn't know Christina Dodd had a new book out. I didn't, that there's no substitute for that kind of sales. So now you have to take yourself down to a bookstore like the Poison Pen
Mhm.
to get that display. And that's just invaluable, because that's a curated display. It's not just every piece of junk ever written.
It's on a logarithm, yeah, that's feeding you things.
Yeah. And there's somebody behind the counter who can say, oh, if you liked her, you're going to like him. That kind of, there's just no substitute.
I can't believe how quickly our time has flown by before I try to click on buttons and end this, which always takes a few minutes. Can you remind everyone watching once again about your new book and maybe your website, social media information, Jayne?
Yes. My new book is People in Glass Houses, written under my Jayne Castle name, but both names are on the cover. So it's, if you search under one, you're going to get it. They're both come up. If you go to a bookstore, you'll see it. People in Glass Houses, and social media. My website is kind of my library on the web. That's where you're going to find lists of my books sorted by series, and everything is there. JayneAnnKrentz.com. And I'm also on Facebook, Jayne Ann Krentz.
And Instagram, you're on Instagram.
Yes. Well, I think if you're on one, you're kind of on the other these days. Isn't that how it works?
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, Instagram too.
And she crapped out on TikTok.
Well, is it any surprise, Christina? I mean, when she's faced with the queen of TikTok, you kind of have to get out of the way.
I just took one look at Christina's TikTok page and I realized I couldn't possibly compete.
Yes, or she took 2 lessons with, I don't want to do this.
And I paid $200 too for those lessons. Yeah.
I did.
How to do TikTok videos. Oh, well.
I didn't even know that Jayne had the quitter gene in there at all. But boy, you got her for those videos and she's out the door.
Yeah, I quit.
Christina, what's coming from you? And what's new? What's coming? What's your website, social media?
once again, A Daughter of Fair Verona is coming, and it's the first of an exciting new series of mystery and humor. And about the daughter of Romeo and Juliet. And my website is christinadodd.com, and that has all of my books on it. And because this book is so very, very, very different, I decided to design another entirely different website for it, which is daughterofmontague.com. And it's a great place to sign up and onto the mailing list. And also, one of the things we did is research. My husband and I had a very large anniversary last year, and we went to Verona, and we did research. It was great. And there's pictures and videos up.
Before I go, I do want to assure Christina Dodd fans out there that A Daughter of Fair Verona is a bit different, but at its core, it's Christina. So if you like her other books, it's not that big a leap into this new venture for her. So don't be put off by Shakespeare or Renaissance Italy.
No, I am not a Shakespearean scholar. I'm just a fan.
A fan.
I'm
This
a fan.
is the ultimate fan fiction.
Written by an expert. I want to thank Jayne and Christina for taking time to visit the Poison Pen virtually. We're always pleased when they can share their expertise, their knowledge, their insight, and their insults with us here at the Poison Pen. And I want to thank everyone for tuning in to another virtual author program with the Poison Pen. Thank you.
Thank you, John. This was
Thank
great.
you.
Thank
I
you.
always love this. Love coming here, virtually or otherwise.
Oh, you're both terrific. If I accidentally cut you off, thanks again.